League of Legends has champions. Those are the characters that you can play in the game. Those champions were already made into cards for Legends of Runeterra, but come on, Hearthstone's better. So let's see what these cards look like in Hearthstone. Sorako, 1 mana 2/1 neutral legendary, divine shield, spells that deal damage restore health instead. This is obviously a really cool card. There is so much utility when it comes to this. If you're going against a complete burn deck, you kind of just counter their win condition until they kill this card. If you need to heal yourself rather than dealing damage, this card can be very helpful with that. If this card lives and you pyroblast yourself, it's 10 life, even though that sounds absolutely horrible. I will say this card is probably broken. A 1 mana 2/1 divine shield is one of the best minions I've ever seen in Hearthstone. If they were going to print this kind of effect, I think it would have to be a 1 mana 1/2 on this, or just put this at 2 mana. But you're probably playing this mainly for the effect, and I do think the effect is extremely powerful. I do think this card is really cool, and something like this in the game could be toxic, but I think if you balance it correctly, this effect could be really cool. Taliyah, 5 mana 4/3 druid legendary, spell burst, enemy characters can't attack next turn. For those of you who don't remember, spell burst is procced when you play a spell. So this is a 5 mana 4/3, which is pretty mediocre on stats. If you do get the spell burst, it's almost like playing Frost Nova, but it's even better because the enemy hero can't attack. So if you're going against a demon hunter, this card can be really, really good. This effect can be so powerful. You can play this with a coin or a 1 mana spell, and next thing you know, your opponent can't really do anything on their side. And would this effect be kind of broken? I don't necessarily think so. I do think that this effect is very relatable to just Frost Nova, and Frost Nova was inherently broken. They actually printed Varden Dawn's Grasp and Barons, and this effect is almost the exact same thing, except for it doesn't freeze the face. I think this effect would see play in Hearthstone, and I don't think the effect is necessarily toxic. Please subscribe, a 0 mana spell. Your viewer hits the subscribe button. Sorry, I had to. Aurelian Soul, 35 mana 12/12 Dragon Mage legendary. 35 mana is a lot of mana. Cost 1 less for each spell you've cast this game. Battle Cry, deal 20 damage to the enemy hero. Dealing 20 damage to the enemy hero is really good, and because we also have Brand currently in standard, this could potentially just OTK your opponent. 35 mana is a lot, and in order for you to OTK with Brand, this would have to come down to 7 mana. All of your mana on spells. I still feel like this win condition would be kind of weak, and that's probably a good thing. If this was too strong, this card would be awful to play against. Do you guys think this card is broken? Let me know with a comment down below, but I don't think this card is necessarily too strong. It is just a really, really crazy card. Next, we have Echo, 3 mana 3/3 neutral legendary. Battle Cry, start the turn over 2 uses left. This isn't just getting another turn, this is starting the turn over, which means you can do a turn, see how well it pans out for you, and then restart the turn if you think you can do it better. This could be really good in a deck like Grimpation, which requires a lot of thinking, and sometimes you just don't have enough time. But most of the time, I feel like this is just not going to be that relevant of a card, even though this effect looks really powerful. Imagine your opponent when you play this card, they have to wait for a whole other turn, and there might actually be a win condition of you just roping your opponent out 3 turns in a row. I don't necessarily think that this is that strong, but I do think the effect could be cool in a very niche case. Next, we have Katarina, a 3 mana 4/2 legendary for Rogue. Combo, your spells are poisonous this turn. Rogue used to have access to Fan of Knives, so this card would be very, very good for just a full AoE board clear, but they don't really have access to Fan of Knives anymore, and most of the spells in Rogue Arsenal at the moment are just single target. So this card is completely based on what spells Rogue really has access to. We had a card a while ago called Razor Leaf Petal, which would be very good with Katarina. Obviously, we have seen this effect in Hunter, and it doesn't see a ton of play, but maybe with Rogue, because they're really good at getting tempo, this would see a little bit more. Zillion, a 5 mana 6/5 mage legendary. Battle Cry, Spell Burst, and Death Rattle. Shuffle, can't time this into your opponent's deck. Can't time this is a 2 mana spell cast when drawn. Your turn is only 15 seconds long. So 5 mana 6/5 is obviously not a super premium stat line in Hearthstone right now. Sometimes your opponent is going to have a really complicated turn, and then they draw can't time this, and all of a sudden their decision becomes a lot harder. But is this effect worth running into your deck? Probably not. I think the gimmick here is just not powerful enough whatsoever. Even if I manage to get all 3 can't time this in my opponent's deck, they may not even draw it, which means I'm playing a 5 mana 6/5 in my mage deck. Doesn't seem super great. Poppy, a 1 mana 1/3 paladin legendary. At the end of your turn, spend all your mana, give a random minion in your hand that much attack and health. So this card is obviously extremely interesting. It adds an extra layer of you not playing cards so you can buff minions in your hand. The problem with this effect, you're not really gaining tempo as you play it. I would almost think that this card would be better if it just said at the end of your turn, for each mana crystal you spent that turn, give it to a random minion in your hand. That card would be a little bit broken at a 1 mana 1/3, I think, but in its current state, I just feel like it's too weak. Most of the time you're gonna play this, it's gonna be a 1 mana 1/3. You wouldn't want to play anything on turn 2. You wouldn't necessarily want to play anything on turn 3 if this still stays alive, which means you're not really developing your board. Maybe you can make it in some kind of OTK deck. You drop this later in the game and don't spend any mana whatsoever and just hope it hits the right minion, but that feels so weak. So I don't think this card would actually see any play. Reksai, a 8 mana 7/10 demon legendary for Warlock. Rush, can't attack heroes. This minion is dormant during your opponent's turn. The idea of this, I would imagine, is you would play this, you would kill a minion, it would go dormant, your opponent would play another minion, and you would probably get another kill with this. That feels pretty weak. Generally speaking, this card might 2-for-1, but most of the time just killing 2 minions isn't going to be good enough in Hearthstone at 8 mana. Maybe in a value-oriented matchup, this card would be one of the best cards in the game. The fact that this really can't attack heroes is the biggest issue with this card. If this could attack heroes, I think it actually would be decent because you have that ability to kill a minion and then you get a guaranteed 7 damage to your opponent's face the next turn. But I don't know, I feel like the ability to not go face is just such a huge drawback in Hearthstone that this card probably would not see any play. Maybe if you reduce the mana cost and keep the stats to 7 mana, because I do think the ability to not attack heroes is actually such a big deal in Hearthstone. Rise, a 1 mana 1/3 mage legendary. At the end of your turn, spend all your mana, gain that much spell damage. This is a very snowbally effect. This card is obviously comparable to the Poppy card we saw earlier, but I do think this effect is a little bit more scary. Often gaining spell damage is much more threatening than just random buffs to minions. If you play this on turn 1 and you don't really play anything for the next couple of turns, those spells start ramping up. Just for not playing any mana after turn 1, that's 2 spell damage, and then it's 3 spell damage, and that could be extremely powerful. Spell damage is a very premium effect in Hearthstone. It's almost like you're getting a discount on a spell, because if Fireball did 10 damage and Pyroblast cost 10 mana, you're saving 6 mana. That's a really, really big deal. I feel like this card is very comparable to Mizaki. Rather than not spending mana to get spell damage, you're spending mana on spells that actively impact the board or hit your opponent's face to gain more spell damage. And Mizaki becomes just as big of a threat as Rise does, but Mizaki is obviously much scarier because the ramp up can happen on the same turn. I feel like out of 1 mana 1/3, this card isn't the worst thing in the world, but I don't think it's going to see any play, but cool effect. Next we have Teemo, a 3 mana 1/3 hunter legendary, stealth poisonous battle cry. Shuffle a mushroom trap in your opponent's deck. A mushroom trap is cast when drawn, you take 1 damage, shuffle mushroom trap that deals +1 damage to your deck. This is a very good card. 3 mana 1/3 to virtually kill any minion is obviously really good, and because it's also stealth, your opponent really can't interact with it unless they have an AoE clear. You're also getting the benefit of shuffling a mushroom trap in. This could potentially win you the game just from the mushroom trap alone, which means your opponent is kind of on a clock. I think this card is probably, I want to say balanced, but it has the potential to be just really, really good. I think the idea of a mushroom trap though is really cool. We kind of saw this with Hakar, but Hakar did it with both decks rather than just your opponent. Maybe this card would just be a little bit too toxic to have in Hearthstone, and maybe it would be completely fine. Let me know with a comment down below what you think of Teemo. Evelynn, a 5 mana 4/3 priest warlock legendary. Battle cry, take control of the lowest cost enemy minion. At the end of your turn, destroy it. Obviously this card at surface level just looks like take a minion from your opponent and kill it, and sometimes that's just going to be good enough at 5 mana 4/3. Sometimes they're only going to have 1 minion on their side that has a pretty powerful effect, and you can just take it and you can potentially win the game off that. Imagine stealing a card like Rag. Rag does the 8 damage and then it dies. That's a pretty great swing turn overall. I think this card would see play in Hearthstone. Viego, a 10 mana 6/6 rogue legendary. Battle cry, if you played 5 cards from another class this game, equip Blade of the Rune King. Before we even look at Blade of the Rune King, this card obviously fits very nicely into Thief Rogue. Thief Rogue is an archetype right now in Hearthstone. A 10 mana 6/6 is pretty bad, so it really depends on how good this weapon will be. Blade of the Rune King is an 8 mana 5/3 weapon, immune while attacking. After your hero kills a minion, summon a copy of it with Rush and Lifesteal. Obviously a very powerful effect on a weapon. It only has 5 attack on it though, which you may have to use other things to kill some minions to get a really powerful one. And because Viego does cost 10 mana, you can't really play anything else with this. If you put Viego maybe down to 8 mana, because you do have to spend mana on other cards just to get Viego to be good, I think that with a 8 mana Viego, Blade of the Rune King would be probably a pretty great win condition. Rather than even focusing on minions, you just hit face and just do 15 damage with Rogue. That could also just be good. Wukong, a 7 mana 6/7 hunter legendary. Your other minions are disguised as Wukong until they attack or receive damage. Fortunately, it is a very weak card. A 7 mana 6/7 wouldn't see play, and you already have to have the prerequisite of other minions on the board for this to be good. Now, the effect is really cool. This could play with your opponent's mind a little bit, and they would have to kind of guess which minion is actually the real Wukong, which one's just a different minion, and that could be really cool for interaction in Hearthstone. Evaluating this card is hard because it really depends on how good disguising your other minions as another minion is. We haven't really seen that effect in Hearthstone, so let me know what you think, how powerful this effect would be, because I'm a little iffy on it. But thank you for watching. If you want to see the rest of the cards, they're going to be in a link down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.